Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Saladino. This podcast is the result of my relentless search to understand and correct the roots of chronic disease and illness. In this podcast, I will share with you everything I have learned about how to live the most healthy and radical life possible. Thanks for joining me on this journey. What is up, you guys? Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. So excited that you are here with me this week, and I am proud as heck, as always, to tell you about my passion company, Heart and Soil Supplements. I want to read you a review from Brenda G, who left this on the 16th of April. It's about histamine and immune. She says, I use the histamine and immune for allergies and a constant itching. I checked with doctor after doctor about my nose being constantly itchy. They had no answers. I even was checked for melanoma several times. After research, I thought I might have become histamine sensitive. I tried various supplements, quercetin, bromelain, then I heard about histamine and immune. I've been taking it for 1.5 months, and it has definitely given me some relief. I can sleep because I am not battling an itchy nose all night. I definitely recommend this supplement. It is so cool to hear from people who are benefiting from what we're doing at Heart and Soil. You guys all know that eating nose to tail, getting organs in your diet is something I'm passionate about. I think this is the cheat code for professional sports, for athletes, for weekend warriors, for non-athletes, for children, for all of us, that these are the nutrients that we have been missing, whether it's riboflavin or folate or zinc or manganese or copper or the microcrystalline hydroxyapatite like we have in bone matrix, or the diamine oxidase like is found in histamine and immune, or the special peptides found in organs like lungs, which are also in histamine and immune. These are so valuable for humans. They're invariably consumed by hunter-gatherer tribes, and they are something that will level up your life and help you reclaim your ancestral birthrights, radical health. So check us out at heartandsoil.co. If you need, if you want, if you would like to reclaim your ancestral birthright to radical health. Check it out, you guys. This week's podcast is with Miki Ben-Dor. I've had him on the podcast before. We'll put a link in the show notes, the previous episode. And this is an amazing conversation. I've gotten a bunch of people sending me a paper that Miki recently published about the human trophic level, what humans were eating for the majority of our evolution. This is a paleoanthropology podcast with a paleoanthropologist. So thank you to Miki for coming on. I think you guys will really enjoy this one. There are a lot of insights that come out of this, and it was a super fun conversation. So Miki's amazing. He's a PhD in paleoanthropology. He lives in Israel. That's all you need to know about him. He's incredible. His bio is in the show notes. I've had him on before. You'll love this one. If you like this podcast, please leave me a review wherever you listen, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever. Please leave me a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It helps me reach more people. It helps us reach more people with this message that I think is really game-changing, for lack of a better term. It's really going to change the world in a positive way and help many people just lead richer lives. So as a thank you to everyone who's leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, I will select one person a month and send them a signed copy of my book if you leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for your help with that. And thank you to my sponsors. As always, White Oak Pastures, this 6th generation family farm, 120 years in the family of the Harrises. Jenny and Will Harris run it now in Bluffton, Georgia. They are really leading the charge in regenerative agriculture. Elon Musk, I know you're listening to this. I don't know why you haven't thought about regenerative agriculture as a way to sequester carbon. Every time I talk to people, they say, don't cows hurt the environment? And I say, do you know about regenerative agriculture? And they don't. They don't understand the way that cows sequester carbon in the soil. If you look at the soil at White Oak, it's brown, it's dark, it's black like coffee. It's way more carbon, which holds rainwater, which prevents erosion, which makes healthier plants and healthier animals. You can taste it in the meat, you guys. These folks at White Oak are leading the charge. They are doing the good work, and the meat is delicious. They also have organs, all kinds of good stuff. Check them out, whiteoakpastures.com. You can use my code, CarnivoreMD, for 10% off your first order. They have organs and suet, all kinds of stuff. They have soy and corn-free chickens that they did just for us because I asked them to. So check them out, whiteoakpastures.com. Another farm that I really love is Belcampo. They're in Northern California, belcampo.com. We are doing a sweepstakes right now with Belcampo and Heart and Soil. If you go to belcampo.com/pages/heart-soil, you can enter, and you better tell all your friends to do it, to win a year's supply of Belcampo meat, a year supply of hardened soil supplements, and a consult with me. And if you really want, I'll just take you surfing instead. And I'll give you all the waves because I'm not that good anyway. Whatever. Come hang out with me. Or we can just talk on the phone. Anyway, that sweepstakes is going on at Belcampo. Belcampo is another farm doing regenerative agriculture the right way, organic, amazing stuff. Check them out, belcampo.com. Carnivore MD will get you 20% off your order. And give them a heads up. Tell them I sent you. You can hear Anya Fernald, the CEO of Belcampo, on my podcast in the past. She is an amazing, amazing woman. Also want to tell you about my buddy, Monsel. You guys have heard me talk about him and the work that he does in the past. He has a thing called sacredhunting.com. And sacred hunting is a way to hunt, but it's more than just hunting. You will learn the basics of how to trap, stalk, kill, field dress wild game animals. And sacred hunting adds a ritual and Native American component, making it a rite of passage. I did a hunt with Monsel last January. It was amazing. I shot a deer with my bow. We cleaned the animal together. We shared it with a group over the fire. It was such a communal experience. We expressed gratitude. We were in the environment. We were in nature every single day. It was amazing. This is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get into hunting. Fundamental Health listeners save $250 on their trip by mentioning my name, Paul. You can go to sacredhunting.com/Paul and fill out the 2-minute application. There's only 5 spots available on each hunt. So go to that website, sacredhunting.com/Paul, fill out the 2-minute application, set up an exploratory call with Monsel. If you want to get into hunting, Monsel's your buddy. He's your man. This is the way to do it. Trust me, you'll love it. I am in Costa Rica right now, as many of you know. And guess what? The beds here suck. They're all slopey and crappy. I am really missing my Helix mattress. You can check this out, guys. I really appreciate the way that Helix has a quiz. And I took the quiz. I was matched with a firm mattress, the Dawn, because I am a side sleeper and I sleep on my side throughout the night, and I needed a firm mattress, and it really helped because you're unique and you need a mattress that's built for you. So they have soft, medium, firm mattresses. They are great for cooling if you sleep hot, and they have a Helix Plus mattress for people who are super bulky. You got lots of muscle. Helix Plus is for you. So check them out. It's an amazing thing, but you don't have to take my word for it. They were voted #1 best overall mattress pick of 2020 by GQ and Wired. You can go to the website, take the quiz, order your mattress you're matched to. It comes right to your door, ship for free. You don't even need to go to the mattress store. So where do you go? helixsleep.com/carnivoremd. helixsleep.com/carnivoremd. Take the 2-minute quiz and match to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. They guarantee it. They have a 10-year warranty. Try it out for 100 nights risk-free. They'll even pick it up if you don't love it, but you will. Helix is offering $200 off all mattresses and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Thanks, Helix. helixsleep.com/carnivoremd. I'm trying to get them to send me a mattress in Costa Rica, and it's not really working so well with customs. It turns out they don't really like the mattresses in customs. We're working on it. Anyway, last but not least, Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com. These are the folks, my buddy Andy Mant's company, making what I think are clearly the most scientifically advanced blue blocking glasses, blocking the green and the blue wavelengths at night that are going to mess up your sleep. I wear them all the time, you guys. If I go to dinner with my friends here in Costa Rica, I'm wearing the blue blocking glasses. People just think I'm erudite. They think I'm super cool or hipster. And they're not even prescription glasses. They're just blue blocking glasses. They've got dark yellow lenses. You can look like Elton John. They've got yellow, they've got orange, or I've got the clear lenses. And I think I've got the ones that are called the Jasper. I love them. Check out blueblocks.com. Use the code CarnivoreMD for 15% off your order. And while you're there, check out their sleep mask, their red light device, their light bulbs, and all kinds of cool stuff happening at blueblocks.com. But you know this when you're around a campfire, when you're watching a sunset, light is super important for humans. Protect yourself from blue light at night and sleep better, which leads to all kinds of good things. All right, guys. Thank you for leaving me a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you for checking us out at Heart and Soil. Thank you for supporting our other sponsors. On to the podcast with Miki Ben-Dor. You'll love us. Miki, thanks for coming back on the podcast. It's great to have you here, my friend.
Always a pleasure.
We did a conversation quite a while ago, a few years ago, and talked about human evolution and anthropology. When I was writing my book, you were a great resource in those for those things. So thank you for that. You even actually pre-read and edited some of the chapters of my book in the beginning. So thank you for that. And then we were hoping to cross paths recently in Africa when I was in Tanzania, but you weren't able to leave Israel, I guess, and we didn't get to see each other in Tanzania around the Hadza, but hopefully our paths will cross in person soon, my friend.
Sure, sure. I'll come to Costa Rica.
You should. You should come to Costa Rica. Do you surf?
Yeah.
Do you surf?
No. I don't. I do cycling and that, but I don't surf, no.
Well, there's no shortage of sun, and there's a lot of jungle here, so it's my own little slice of paradise right now, and I'm doing my best to live my sort of radical, primal, primitive life here as much as possible. But we will put a link to our first conversation in the show notes for people. That's a really great background for human evolution, but your work in the anthropology space really is centered around what humans have eaten for the majority of our evolution and how it shapes who we are today. This is something that I'm fascinated by. And in the last few weeks, so many people have sent me links to your most recent paper that I wanted to have you back on the show to just break this paper down for people, because it's a really interesting consideration of what humans, or pre-humans, hominids, pre-Homo sapiens, species were eating and how we know what they might have been eating. And maybe we could draw from that conclusions about how we might eat today as humans as well, which is really the whole reason that I went to Africa and spent time and lived and hunted with the Hadza, because they're in some ways a living representation of many of these cultures or species that we may talk about today. Certainly people believe that the Hadza are perhaps the closest living relatives we have to the original Homo sapiens in Africa that arose in the Rift Valley a few 100,000 years ago. But why don't we start with this paper and your considerations here? So I'll screen share the paper. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. But it's really an incredible paper. It's quite comprehensive. But the title of the paper is "The Evolution of the Human Trophic Level During the Pleistocene." So I'm not an anthropologist. You are. Why don't you walk us through what got you interested in this? Maybe tell us what the Pleistocene is, and give us some background on this paper, and then we'll dive in.
Okay. The reason for that paper is that until today, most of the reconstruction of the human diet during the Pleistocene and the Paleolithic era is more or less the same. It's about 2.6 or 2.8, I don't remember, to about 11,000 years ago, 2.8 million years to about 11,000 years ago. So Pleistocene, Paleolithic era is the same. And the reason is that most of the reconstruction of the diet until today was based almost exclusively on what I call 20th century hunter-gatherers. And it becomes more and more apparent as the research on African fauna progress that the ecological situation in Africa is nothing. There's no parallel today in today's ecological situation. You've been to Ngorongoro recently, right?
Yes.
Okay, so and you've seen the Hadza, right?
Yes.
So take the Hadza, put them in the Ngorongoro, and add about 100% more large mega herbivores species to the animal community there, and this is where early humans used to live. Okay, so it's a completely different environment than the one that they are living in today. But people wanted to know what was the trophic level. Trophic level meaning how much animal food and how much plant food human ate. So they went to archaeologists. and asked them for, what was the trophic level. And the archaeologists really don't have a clue from archaeology. Because in archaeology, you can find a lot of what people ate. And people ate everything that was edible. But how much? It's just not there. The data is just not there. You can look at trends, etc., but there is no one single archaeological method that can tell you what was the trophic level, apart from stable isotopes, and we can discuss about it later. And so the easiest way out for them was to come to and look at the hunter-gatherers today, or recent. They're not even today, they're gone, but in the 20th century, more or less. And the picture that you get when you look at the 20th century hunter-gatherers was a very flexible species that is so smart that it can survive anywhere, in any ecology, and the rate of plants to animal food is completely flexible. So that was their answer. And this is also an easy answer because you don't commit to anything. You just say, they were flexible. So I didn't like it at all. So I wrote, first of all, a paper about why the current hunter-gatherers are no analogy for the past humans. And then I had to come up with something positive as well. So I've been collecting for the last 10 years or so evidence for the human trophic level. And trophic level is the most important element when you want to know about evolution. Because most of evolution is actually geared to get food, right? If you think about it, most of the evolution adaptations, the end result that they need, that are, the purpose is to get food. So so first of all, you want to know what kind of food they were adapted to, what kind of food they were looking for. And the major question is, are they specialized or are they generalists? So I've been collecting, like I said, the evidence for both, whatever I could lay my hand on. And then I realized that actually most of the evidence is in our biology. Most of the memory of what we ate is in our body. This is where you have to look. You don't have to be an archaeologist. You have to be a biologist. And that's why I asked Rafi Sirtoli to join me. And so that I don't write too much nonsense. And actually, it was already part of my PhD thesis, and he helped me there. And so we decided that when we write the paper, he will join me in the paper. So that's how the paper came about. And this is why it was so important for me to reconstruct the evolution of the human trophic level throughout the Pleistocene. And I don't know if you want me to get into the details now, but this is the background of this paper.
Perfect. Yeah, we can get into the details in one moment. But in case people are wondering about Ngoro, I talked about this on the 2 podcasts that I did previously with Anthony Gustin on my podcast. Ngoro is a volcanic caldera that is essentially it's an extinct or a quiescent volcano. The walls of the Ngoro crater are a few, or maybe 1,000 meters high in some places. And you have the closest thing that I could imagine to the Garden of Eden. It's maybe 20 kilometers in diameter at points, and I could be off a little bit in those measurements, but you have essentially a circular realm with walls
of the edges of the volcanic caldera, and in the crater, in the bottom of this caldera, is the greatest collection of animals I've ever seen on the planet. It was striking. We saw everything driving around there. Now it's a preserved national park in Tanzania. No, I don't think that the government allows any hunter-gatherer groups to live there and hunt there. There are some Maasai kind of on the edge, but no, the Hadza are not allowed there anymore. Presumably they would have been there in the past. Certainly our ancestors were there. But animals get in there and they can't get out. And so you see hundreds of zebra next to hundreds of water buffalo, next to 10 elephants walking along, next to a jackal and a rhino and a pond with 6 hippopotami in there, or hippopotamuses, I think hippopotami, in this pond. And then you see a pride of lions stalking, and you see the closest thing, like I said, that you could imagine to a Garden of Eden. And the point that you're making, Miki, is so important because the Hadza really said the same thing. We asked them, are the animals that you're hunting now the same as what you've always hunted? Were there more animals in the past? And they were unequivocal here. They said there were clearly more animals in the past to hunt. There were much bigger animals to hunt. And the animals they're hunting now are kind of the leftovers. It's almost as if they've been, they used to have an all-you-can-eat Mongolian buffet or all-you-can-eat Mongolian barbecue, and now they're just picking the scraps off the land, and that's really affecting them negatively. And as I talked about on the podcast with Anthony Gustin, we want to try and preserve their land around Lake Eyasi because what they need are large tracts of land that are wilderness to allow big animals to come back. I'm not sure if it's something that we'll be able to do, but we're certainly going to try. But
by the way, the vegetation is also completely different than to the one that they live in. For example, they take a lot of their plant food from the tree, the baobab, right? Well, when there are elephants, there are no baobab. Elephants are baobab predators. There's a paper. You put in Google baobab predator, and you get an elephant. In game reserves, when elephants started to recover, the baobab started to disappear, and the game reserve managers were worried about it. They didn't know what to do because these baobab, they just killed these elephants. They just killed the baobab. So just imagine this area without baobab tree. The baobab, by the way, is not only for the seeds and the fruit, but the main bee that they are using, the honey, also stays on that tree. So just imagine the Hadza without the baobab. Where do they get the plant food? They could only get this roots and some some tubers, and by the way, berries. Elephants also eat berries. They can kill. They don't kill the berries, but they love berries. So they have a competition for the berries. So the San, for instance, the San, which is another tribe, right, that live in Botswana, some of them. They rely on mogongo nuts for about 50% of their diet. And elephants, when they get around the mogongo tree, they just finish the nuts. And then the tree can't recover for years after that. So it's just not the same environment whatsoever. And just take another point. You said you talked about the lions in Ngorongoro. Just imagine the women going out for hours and hours on end with the kids when the lions are around. So this is something that you can do in the area where they live now, but you could not do in an area where there are a lot of predators that hunt large animals. So it's just not the same same situation at all. So and the analogy is just a waste of time. It's misleading more than leading.
Such an important point that, you know, in the 1980s and 1990s, a paleo diet was popularized, and I've had Lauren Cordain on my podcast, and I've never had Boyd Eaton on my podcast, but so much of the work of these original Paleolithic thinkers was based on these, quote, 20th century hunter-gatherer tribes when they were looking at plant-animal ratios and macronutrient ratios. And you're making a really important point here that just because hunter-gatherers today are eating a certain way doesn't mean this is the way that humans have eaten for the majority of our evolution. And the corollary conclusion, or the corollary, I guess, inference that we can draw there is, if our diets were different 85,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago than they are today, does that have ramifications for who we are as humans, or have we adopted over those intervening 85 or 50,000 years? Because ultimately what we're asking are, it's interesting to understand how humans have lived, but we kind of want to know how humans might eat today to be optimally healthy. That's the ultimate question that we're asking. And in the Paleolithic circles, the conclusions they drew about that were probably based on hunter-gatherers that did not have an accurate reflection of the way that humans have evolved. And so I really appreciate this work that you're doing. Now, if we get into this paper, you make a lot of really important points. I mean, there are literally 25 points within this paper to support your conclusion or your assertion that humans were essentially eating mostly animals during this Pleistocene period. But why don't you walk us through some of these? I can bring up the paper if you want to start with some of these, but I think perhaps the first thing I'd like you to comment on, and you mentioned this earlier, but I want to emphasize it, is a point you made that within omnivores, because I think that we're not really trying to debate or split hairs and say humans are carnivores. We're omnivores. We can accept that humans are omnivorous. But you make an important point in the paper that just because a species is an omnivore, it could be a generalist omnivore or a specialist omnivore. And walk us through that a little bit.
Right. So if you take the mammals, and somebody did the job, took 139 species of mammals that where the diet is known, and he found out that 80% of them are omnivores. Now, omnivore, the definition is an animal that eats from two trophic levels. So, in our case, one trophic level will be plants and the other one will be animals. So this is the definition of omnivore. Even if it eats 1% of animals and 99% of plants, technically the species is an omnivore. So there are mammals, okay, 80% of them are omnivores, but 75% of that 8% are specialized. And the other ones are not omnivores, so they are specialized anyway. So most of the, like I think 80% of the mammals are specialized animals. We, all of us, mammals, or most of us. So to state that humans are specialized is not so outrageous. We come actually from a genus of specialized animals. Chimpanzees specialized. Most primates are specialized. Almost all of them are specialized. So it's not, they are omnivores, all of them, but they're specialized omnivores. So this is something that I thought we have to clarify. It's not only in the popular debate about diet. It's in actually even scientists fall for this problem.
I thought it was really interesting when I read it in this paper. The first point that I want to emphasize is that our predecessors in the primate world are chimpanzees and bonobos. And rather than being herbivorous, these species are omnivores. This is the first point to make. chimpanzees and bonobos will eat other monkeys. They will eat meat when they can get it. So it is false for anyone to say that we are descended from herbivores. We're descended from omnivores. Now, the point you're making here is well taken, that we're descended from omnivorous primates who are specialized to eat from the plant trophic level. So the corollary argument could be, well, why aren't humans? How do you know that humans aren't specialized to eat from the plant trophic level? And this is really the type of thing that you go into in this paper, because what we're suggesting here, what you're suggesting and what I'm suggesting in my work, is that as we evolved from chimpanzees and bonobos, we went from being an omnivorous species specialized at the plant trophic level to an omnivorous species that strongly appears to be specialized at the animal food trophic level. Am I correct with all that?
Yes, definitely, definitely. This is the path that, according to our study, human took. Yes. And by the way, if you take mammals, normally they don't go from specialization to omnivory. They normally go from omnivory to specialization. And and in our case, from specialization to another specialization. Like I said, most mammals are specialized. And it's very important to understand that being a generalist is not like a winning strategy for everybody. It has its price, because it means that you don't specialize in obtaining a certain kind of food, and you're in competition with animals that do specialize. So there is a cost for that. It's not like a costless strategy. That's why there are not so many mammals that are generalists.
And if we look at the progression of the human brain, or the hominid brain, as we made the transition from Australopithecus to Homo habilis and Homo erectus, and then on from Homo erectus to Neanderthal and eventually Homo sapiens, the human brain expanded massively. And I think there are lots of lines of evidence, and you and I have talked about this, suggesting that a big part of this shift, or perhaps the major spark in this shift in the size of the human brain, was our shift from a plant-specialized omnivore to an animal-specialized omnivore. This is something that I suggested in my book, that eating meat and organs made us human. And this is exactly the shift along an omnivorous path from plant specialization to animal specialization. But we see something happening. We are very different than our primate ancestors. Our guts look different. We can talk about all these things. Our brains are bigger. Our large intestines are smaller. But I think that there's a huge magic that happened here that allowed us to become who we are. We can see the effects of this shift. Something happened, right? Something is different about us that perhaps points to this.
It shouldn't surprise us that much, because primates, in general, use their brain. I mean, they have a larger brain than most mammals, relatively speaking, to their weight, etc. So really, we are a genus, we are a family or whatever that used to solve problems with problem getting food, because it's also, if you take primates, the higher quality their food, the larger their brain. So it also goes with this challenge. So the higher the challenge of obtaining, and of course the higher the quality, the higher the challenge, because high quality food is scarcer. So you need more brain, and this is how primates get it, by their brain. So we just went to the highest quality possible, which is fat, and became specialized in obtaining fat. So we had actually to get a larger brain. This is the way that primates solve problems.
Now, in the paper, you mentioned that prior to this this publication that you did, there was a little bit of evolutionarily guided reconstruction of the human trophic level by Henenberg. And Henenberg made some good points. I thought maybe I'd let you talk about those, and then we can jump into all of the points that you were making.
Okay, I just don't remember offhand what Henenberg.
So you say in the paper Henenberg cited.
This is probably the gut structure.
Exactly, heme iron, the gut, and Tinea saginata.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Okay. So let's talk about the gut structure. If you take chimpanzee as a starting point, and I must say that you have to be careful with that because really chimpanzee is not our ancestor. We have a common ancestor with the chimpanzee. So we don't really know what a common ancestor looked like. But we can assume, since they lived on trees, that the plants were their major food. So if we take the chimpanzee, and you have to really do two things. You have to take from Milton one piece of information about the relative lengths of small intestines and large intestines, and you have to take from another source the fact that our gut is 40% smaller than a chimpanzee. So if you take these two and you make the calculation, you find out that our large intestine, the colon, became shorter by 77%. So colon is where actually a lot of the plant energy is extracted. Because you don't only have to get the energy, you have to assimilate it. So colon, so the main organ that is used to extract energy from plants, in our case, it went shorter. So today we can extract, Rafi says, something like 4% maximum of our calories from plants. And this is the major, I think the major evidence that we evolved to specialize, because one of the ways in which you can judge specialization is when you have evolution that allows you to consume one type of food but prevents you or interrupts you from consuming another type of food. So this is a classic one. And at the same time, the small intestines extended by about 66%, according to my calculations. So this is compared to a chimpanzee the same size as we are. So in the small intestines, this is where sugar and protein and fat get absorbed. So sugar, we don't consume more sugar than a chimpanzee. Nobody would argue that. So the extension really, it makes sense, happened because we needed to assimilate more fat and protein. So, I think this is one of the major, very, very strong proof that we evolved to become a specialist carnivore, not just a generalist. The other one is that parasite, I don't remember the...
Tinea saginata. It's the beef tapeworm, essentially.
Yeah. This one resides only in carnivores, this type of parasite. But the specific one is the one that evolved to stay to live in humans. So it proves that we were carnivorous enough for that creature to reside and to live in us.
And nobody really wants to think about tapeworms. They're very rare in beef today, guys. They don't really, the USDA prevents this. The good quality of beef today prevents this. But the fact that there is an organism, there's multiple different species of Taenia that are tapeworms. There's a species of Taenia that occurs in pork, but the Taenia saginata is exclusively, like Miki is saying, seems to have co-evolved with humans, again suggesting the path toward specialized carnivory or specialized animal-based eating along the human trophic level, or the trophic level. Now, the other thing you mentioned here, which was interesting, is our specialization to absorb heme iron. You want to talk about that?
No, I'll let you talk about it.
Okay. So people may know that heme iron is an iron atom within the porphyrin ring. And the porphyrin ring is what's inside of our hemoglobin molecule inside of a red blood cell. And it is interesting, as Miki points out in this paper, that humans have a clear specialization, a clear preference to absorb iron as heme iron. And heme iron only occurs in animal foods. There are many, many women and men, but especially women because they have menstruation every month, who develop iron deficiency anemia in 2021. And I think that a big reason for this is that we are eating, as a culture, as a society, much less meat, much less red meat than we were evolutionarily, and we have been. This is yet another reason that the reconstruction of the human trophic level is important. It gives us signal as to what we might do. So if we were still omnivorous with a specialization toward plants, we might have remained a species that has a preference to absorbing iron from the plant form. Presumably, our primate ancestors do that because they don't seem to get iron deficiency anemia. They have red blood cells, they have blood, they need to get iron, but they seem to be evolved to actually use the iron that's in plants, which is non-heme iron. There are many examples of this where humans appear to be more adapted to the, quote, animal-based forms of nutrients, whether it's omega-3 fatty acids, retinoic acid versus beta-carotene, B vitamins like folate and B6, and in this case, heme iron. So it's yet another reason that we might say, oh, it's pretty clear there was a shift here. The other point you make is stomach acidity, and I think this one is particularly fascinating.
Yeah, this one is one that I really like, because again, to maintain acidity in the stomach is a serious business. I'm sure you know more about it than I do. But first of all, to produce the acidity takes energy, and then to keep the walls, the stomach walls, to contain that acidity is also takes a lot of energy to replace the cells that line the walls, etc., etc. So it's a very, very unique situation that we have with very, very high acidic stomach compared to other creatures, higher than omnivores, or generalists, I should say, because we are also omnivores, higher than carnivores, and actually in the same range as scavengers. Right, that's what I was looking for. So the people who wrote the paper says, oh, it looks like humans were scavengers. Now, these guys don't know paleoanthropology, and what I liked about it is it doesn't only show that we are carnivores, but in my opinion, it also shows that we are carnivores of large animals, because we are very unique in that we take we kill, and then we butcher, and we take the parts to a central space where we guard the meat and fat, and we feed on them for days on end, if they are large enough. So at that time, they develop, of course, bacteria, and this is why the reasons why scavengers have high acidity is to fight the bacteria. So we are like a scavengers, but we are carnivore scavengers, special, very special. And this is a proof also, support to the fact that we specialize not just in hunting, but in hunting large animals.
And I think that that's a very interesting point. You point this out in the paper that the acidity of the human stomach is usually 1.5 to 2, or the pH, and that puts us sort of between these pure scavengers and carnivorous species. And as you point out, it takes a lot of energy to maintain and contain a very acidic stomach. So within human evolution, energy is not wasted. Energy is the currency of evolution. And we spoke earlier about the change in the human gut size, the shrinking of the large intestine, the expansion of the small intestine, which is hypothesized to have allowed energetically for the expansion of the human brain. It's a theory from Leslie Aiello known as the expensive tissue hypothesis, and there are many lines of evidence to corroborate this. And we would not be wasting energy making a very acidic stomach, pumping protons into the stomach, if there were not a need or a specific benefit for this. So yet another line of evidence. So as we get into your multiple points in the paper, one of the first ones you talk about is bioenergetics, and you make this point that in order to consume enough plant material, primates have to spend a lot of the day eating. You want to walk us through how that's different than humans? And this is actually connected with the large intestine changes as well.
Right. Primates spend, I don't know, many hours a day eating. And the reason is that the food is not that concentrated. And also there's a lot of fiber which they have to grind and increase the area, the contact area, before they swallow it. So we are, in comparison to other to primates, if they, like, let's say, spend, I don't remember the number, but I think it's like 12, 13, 14 hours eating, we spend about an hour or so. So 1/12 of what chimpanzee would spend eating. And this is extremely important, because this leaves us time to do other things, to take care of the kids, to create, to make tools, to go around, look for animals. So it's a basic difference between us and other primates.
And it's really, yeah, it's quite fundamental that we don't spend 13 hours a day eating, because we're not going to eat that much fiber. We don't have the colon that chimpanzees or bonobos or primates do. That's why we have abdominal muscles and ribs that are essentially flat. We can get a six-pack, and we don't have a commodious colon. We don't have a bulbous abdomen, because we don't have a huge colon and a large voluminous cecum to accommodate these massive amounts of fiber, which are then fermented into short-chain fatty acids, which is how primates get their energy. When I was at the Hadza, they spent, about an hour a day eating. They spent a lot of the day hunting, but we certainly didn't eat all day. People have asked me that repeatedly. They had always some degree of time-restricted feeding built in, but with all the changes we've talked about, especially the changes in the human gut, it clearly seems to be leaning toward higher quality food. And this is another thing you talk about in the paper, that the diet quality appears to be much higher in humans than primates. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually the same. It's just the same point. The same thing is that because the quality is so high, we can afford to do other things. We can afford to. It just takes us very short time to digest everything. And by the way, the Hadza still, in my opinion, they consume much more plants than Paleolithic humans. But on the other hand, they have iron to help them, so they don't have this stone, all this stone to deal all with this with the stone work that needs to be done, collecting stones and shaping them,
Yes.
and carrying them. So they have good life in that respect. But on the other hand, they consume, in my opinion, much more vegetal material than humans did. So less concentrated. So it maybe just even out in that situation. But yeah, it's a major. It's a condition for human beings to be able to have time to to grow and to take care of the kids. So the humans, they start to actually cover their energetic costs at the age of 18, 20, something like that. Before that, they have to rely on grown-ups. So anyway the time that they have to spend eating cannot be that high, and because they have a lot of other things to do, and this is culture. It's called culture. They have to shape tools. They have to store. They have to teach. They have to, they have a lot of things to do, and so they have to have this kind of concentrated food that they can eat in, an hour or so.
And one of the things that makes the food so concentrated is the fat. You mentioned this earlier. I know you have a paper talking about fat as this sort of precious, sacred nutrient in anthropologic cultures, in cultures historically, and fat hunters. I think that you have called humans fat hunters primarily, which is quite an interesting thing to think that evolutionarily we were probably hunting fat above everything else. There's lots of examples of more recent hunter-gatherers, Native Americans, looking at a herd of large animals and saying, oh, there's no food here if they're too lean. But some of the adaptations to probably this fat hunting are seen in the ease with which we enter ketosis, higher fat reserves on our body, and genetic and metabolic adaptations to a higher fat diet. So this is moving on to some of these points you're making further in the paper. Can you elaborate on those for us?
Yes. So, if you look at if you go to archaeological sites and you analyze the animals there, you see that humans actually aimed, and also can also be found in recent hunter-gatherers. So you can actually look. You don't have to just rely on archaeological material. Humans aimed at large animals, and humans aimed at how shall I say, I have a little block here, right? Just a minute. At certain age groups that are fatter than others. So prime adults, this is the group that humans, because prime adults, either male or female prime adults, are always the fatter animals in the species. Depends when. So prime females, just before they get, during the pregnancy, they start to collect fat, so they are ready for the time when they feed the babies. And the males are collecting fat in view of the rat. So when they fight for the female, they don't eat. So they have at different times they have each one have more fat than the other. So if you look at the archaeological sites and also at hunter-gatherers, you see that humans specialized in fat. This is what guided the decision on which animal to hunt. And so this tells you that humans are, like a top predator, because the large animals have more fat than smaller animals. And so you see that when large animals start to disappear, they are aiming more at the prime adults. And at the end of the day, when prime adults, when medium-sized animals disappear, really they have no choice but to go become more sedentary and go for plants. Because they are limited in the amount of protein that they can consume. So we have adaptations to deal with fat. And we have also more fat than other animals, than primates, for instance. We have more than double, I think, the amount of fat that other animals have, which also allows us to wait and look for large animals, because large animals hold more of the biomass but that biomass is packed in a smaller amount of large animals. So they are scarcer in the environments, although they hold most of the biomass. So we may pass a week before we find another animals after we finish the last one. So we have to be able to fast efficiently between hunts, and we are very well set up to do that. So this is another proof that we really specialized in large animals. This is our specialty. And larger, and of course, medium animals that are fatter than the rest, which is in this case the prime adults.
And isn't it true that as animals increase in size, generally they have more fat? Obviously, they're larger animals, so they're going to have an absolute amount of more fat, but there are some exceptions, I believe, to this rule. An elephant doesn't have a ton of fat, as far as I'm aware, but generally larger animals tend to have a higher percentage of fat. Is that correct?
Definitely. That's definitely correct, and elephants have a lot of fat.
They do? Okay.
Yeah. It works for the animals, for elephants as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I've calculated like the larger group of animals that we have data on, which does not include the elephants. I think the largest animal there is a hippo. The largest group had like 44% more fat than the next group. So yeah, this is a major reason. And we wrote another paper in which we explained why there is a bias and against why we don't find more large animals in the archaeological sites. And it's basically because it just costs too much to bring the bones, you know. They just bring the animal, or in case of elephants, they just stay next to the elephant sometimes. So there is an underrepresentation of large animals in archaeological sites, to a large extent.
And then you go on in the paper to actually talk about some research from 2019, Swain and Lenz, and we can put all of these references in the show notes, guys. You said they performed comparative analysis of the adipose chromatin landscape. So looking at the fat, the DNA from fat tissue in humans, chimpanzees, rhesus macaques, and they concluded that their findings reflected differences in the adapted diets of humans and chimpanzees. I thought this was really fascinating. The quote was, "Taken together, these results suggest that humans shut down regions of the genome to accommodate a high-fat diet, presumably animal fat, as we're talking about, while chimpanzees open regions of the genome to accommodate a high-sugar diet." So this is almost like epigenetics, right? We're looking at the winding and unwinding of DNA on the proteins that are going to hold DNA, and this is the methylation versus acetylation of DNA, turning genes on and off. And you want to talk about this a little bit? I thought it was fascinating that if you look at the way genes are turned on in human fat, it seems to predispose us. It seems to indicate that we were eating a higher fat diet, and chimpanzees a higher carbohydrate diet. This is exactly what we were talking about earlier with the omnivorous specialization shifting from plant trophic level to animal trophic level.
Right, and there's not much I can add to that, to what you said already. You know, I'm sure that if a biologist was here, he would have been more able to extend on it. But another one like that is the morphological structure of the fat cells in our body. And this is fascinating as well. This is a paper from 1985, and it shows that carnivores and generalists have different morphology of fat cells, whereby generalists have smaller number of larger fat cells, and carnivores have a higher number of smaller fat cells to store the same amount of fat. And lo and behold, we fall squarely within the carnivore group. They explained it somehow with some sensitivity to insulin, etc. But this is the fact. And humans, so it means that humans already were evolving in a very basic way to become carnivores, because primates don't have that structure. Primates have a structure of a generalist more than we do. So it's in my opinion, these are very strong, and they say actually, you know, in the paper in '85 they say this means that human evolved to be a consumer of protein and fat rather than carbohydrates. This is what they say. So these women have no quarrels with vegans or anything. They just were scientists. And they reached this conclusion.
I will screen share this part of the paper so people can see this. This is 2.12 in your paper, Adipocyte Morphology. The paper is Pond and Maddox,
Right.
1985. And the quote that you're referring to is, "These figures suggest that the energy metabolism of humans is adapted to a diet in which lipids and proteins, rather than carbohydrates, make a major contribution to the energy supply. So exactly as you're saying, and it's fascinating that there's this adipocyte morphology. This is something I was not aware of before I read your paper. I thought this was one of the more interesting parts of it as well. They say, interestingly, omnivorous species of the order Carnivora, bears, badgers, foxes, and voles, display more carnivorous patterns than their diet entails. Thus, humans might also be expected to display organization closer to their omnivorous phylogenetic ancestry. However, humans fall squarely within the carnivore adipocyte morphology pattern of smaller, more numerous cells. So pretty interesting stuff there, I thought. And the list goes on and on. We talked a little bit about gut morphology and stomach acidity. Do you want to mention a little bit about the postcranial morphology? I thought this was an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I mean this is Lieberman and others as well that really came to the conclusion that we were hunters based on the changes or the difference between us and the chimpanzees in our postcranial morphology. So the structure of the shoulder, our shoulder, is beautifully adjusted to throw or to throw a spear, and which is not the case of chimpanzee. Chimpanzee's soldier will not allow it. If you give a chimpanzee a stone to throw, he will throw it like 2 meters or so. And then the other paper that is mentioned in this connection is Lieberman, who found out that we became adapted, and I think he gives like 15 different morphological changes that show that we became good runners. And you don't run after plants. I mean, you don't need that. So we were adjusted very well to run after animals and become hunters. So all the physiological, we have like 15 different pieces of evidence show that we evolved to become a predator. And on top of that, we added like 10 other lines of evidence from other areas of science that also confirm that conclusion.
So I'm good friends with Noah Syndergaard, who is known as Thor. He's a fastball pitcher, or I'm sure he has other pitches, but he's a pretty well-known pitcher for the Mets. And Noah would not be able to throw a baseball at close to 100 miles an hour without a shoulder that is adapted to throwing a spear or an atlatl or some other type of a device. If Noah threw a fastball and hit a deer with it, he could kill that deer. Noah could hunt with a baseball. He's so good at throwing things fast. And a chimpanzee cannot throw a fastball like Noah Syndergaard. So there are so many of these adaptations. Pelvic structure, the way our body is structured with the spine. We talked about the rib angle earlier with the gut, the foot anatomy for long walking or stints of running. It's clearly we are changing to be hunters. Now, one of the things that sometimes people will say in response to this is that we have polymorphisms or genetic adaptations to starch and sugar consumption, but you make an interesting point in the paper that those arose pretty late. This is 2.6, late genetic adaptation to the consumption of underground storage organs. I wanted to touch on this a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, we have some adaptations, and one that Rafi doesn't really agree with, but other researchers claim is that the ME1 copies, the number of ME1 is amylase, but it's in the mouth. It's allows early sort of synthesis of the carbohydrates, or early preparation of carbohydrates. So it's not exactly known when we got it, but one hypothesis is that we got it, or we started to have more copies than two, which is what other carnivores have, with Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is about 300,000 years ago. But if you look at Homo sapiens from 20,000 years ago, Europe, you find that not a lot of them had more than two copies. Some of them did, but not a lot of them. And if you look at populations today, or recent populations of farmers and herders, you see a very wide range of copies, from 2 to 14, or if I remember correctly, or 15. So it really looks like it wasn't fixed, this ability to produce more of that amylase in the mouth was not fixed. So you can assume that this is a fairly recent, relatively speaking, of course, adaptation, and it also joins other evidence that about 85,000 years ago in Africa we started to have more plants than before. This one is the FEDS genes that allow us to extend omega-3 to DHA, plant source omega-3 to DHA. But for instance, if you look in Europe, these feds don't appear until very, very late, just before agriculture. So again, when humans got to Europe about 40, 50,000 years ago, they still didn't need that ability to use omega-3 plant source. But in Africa, to some extent, very slight extent, this also happened. And you see, of course, the stone tools, and so there are other, and then of course comes into play the stable isotopes. So you see that there is an increase in the consumption and in our ability to consume plants.
Starting about 85,000 years ago, right?
85,000 years ago, we start to see it in Africa. And in Europe and other places, the record only start to show a very, reasonable or significant increase in the consumption of plants at 25,000 years ago or so.
And do you think that was the beginnings of agriculture or pre-agriculture?
Pre-agriculture. Pre-agriculture started maybe 11,000 years ago.
Yeah. But I think you could imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a situation in which we began eating more plants 10,000 years before the advent of agriculture, but it was this signal that we were sort of running out of our preferred foods, and that may have been the trigger eventually toward the Neolithic age and the Neolithic Revolution and agriculture later on.
Right, because in parallel you see the decline in the prey size. All over the world, about 50, 40,000 years ago, you see a decline in the prey. The prey start to get extinct, large prey. This is in Australia, in Europe, in Asia. Only in America, where people got late, I'm not sure when, but there's a big argument about that. But let's say 14,000 years ago, so the megafauna extinction there, you see starting happening about 12,000 years ago. So wherever humans got around, this megafauna extinction started. And so in parallel to this extinction, you see an increase in the consumption of plants. Because humans cannot consume more than a certain amount, like maybe 40% of their diet from protein, so they need to complete it with either fat or carbohydrates. And when there's no fat from large animals, they're starting to be dependent on plants for that.
Now, do you believe that the majority of this decline in megafauna was due to human hunting of these animals?
Yes. I'm very much convinced of it. There are differences of opinions. It's a big debate, and there's a very important group that claim that the last megafauna extinction, what's called the late quaternary megafauna extinction, that started about 50,000 years ago and lasted until it depends where, but until 10,000 years ago, happened because of humans. And the big reason is that whenever humans got somewhere, this is when that large fauna started to become extinct. Some places it took longer, some places it took, for instance, Europe, was occupied already for many years. So the fauna was, it is thought that the fauna was already adapted and adapted to live with the hunting pressure. But then humans, Homo sapiens came to Europe about 45,000 years ago, and then that's when you see a megafauna extinction begin in Europe as well. And when they arrived in Australia, this is when you see the megafauna happening in Australia. And when they arrive in America, this is where you see the megafauna starting in America. So there are other opinions that it's more associated with the climate, but to me, I'm writing now a paper that add two reasons for that. Is that humans, because they hunted large animals, because they were like specialized in large. So you see, large animals cannot tolerate a lot of hunting pressure because it takes them a very long time to mature. So for elephants, to get more than, I think, 4% hunting pressure is it caused them to get extinct. And humans specialized in large animals. So it doesn't mean that they automatically, all the large animals got extinct because we specialized in large animals, already 1.5 million or 2 million years ago. But the combination probably with unfavorable climate conditions and this constant pressure of hunting, overhunting by humans, this is probably what caused it. And also the other pattern is this hunting of prime adults. Again, this is in a population, this is the age group that stays stable. If you follow a species, you see that there are fluctuations in the young. and there are fluctuations in the old. But that age group of prime adults stays stable, which means that they are very important for the survival of the species. And we specialized in hunting these animals. So if you hunt a female, prime adult female, that has the potential to make a lot of, like, I don't know, 10, 20 babies, it puts a lot of pressure on the species. So we probably were very instrumental in their extinction.
So I appreciate that. Thank you for elaborating. Now, I want to go back to something you were talking about with omega-3 oil metabolism and the FADS gene, which is FADS, the fatty acid desaturase gene. You make a really interesting point in the paper that I wanted to just reinforce for people. You say that, furthermore, Speth, who's another author, proposed that humans biosynthesized sufficient DHA de novo from precursors. And the last argument is compatible with the present existence of several billion people, including some hunter-gatherers, who have never eaten aquatic sourced food, yet they and their offspring can grow and support much larger brains than early humans. Now, I had Stephen Gundry on my podcast recently, and I was talking to him about some of these anthropology concepts, and he was he suggested that human evolution occurred along rivers and waterways, and that much of our evolution was probably dependent on omega-3s from aquatic sources. And I've never really thought that this made sense to me, so I wanted to get your perspective on this. I think that there are plenty of omega-3s in the fat of large animals. We know this. I've done my omega-3 levels on a completely animal-based diet of exclusively ruminant animal fat with no fish in my diet, and my ALA was moderate, my EPA and my DHA were pretty darn high. So what do you think about this theory that humans needed aquatic animals to grow large brains in the context of this omega-3 metabolism?
Yeah, it's a very popular theory proposed by Crawford and Quinlan. And I don't think much of it myself. I think Cordain already wrote a paper, very nice paper, showing that there is enough omega-3 in terrestrial mammals, in the brain. I don't think in the marrow. In marrow, I don't think but in their brains, and I'm not sure where else. I think in the brains, maybe in other places as well, to supply all the needs. Now, if you agree with the theory or the proposal that humans were apex carnivores, it means that they had enough omega-3 in the prey to supply whatever they needed for their brain. And then there's the proof that even today, with a much larger brain than Homo erectus, Homo erectus started with 700 cc. So today we have like 1400. And so I think, and he was a hunter, okay? He was a carnivore. So if he could manage, we can manage as well. And if we can manage with 1400 cc, he could manage with 700 cc quite well on the prey, on the brains and the other sources. Yeah.
I'm also not convinced that massive amounts of omega-3 fatty acids are good for humans or are needed. I think that there's debate within the medical community as well about this. And some people will say more omega-3 is better, end of story. And I think that doesn't make sense evolutionarily. It presents our bodies with a large amount of a very unstable fatty acid because it has many double bonds in it. And so,
Right, they're as unstable as omega-6. So
exactly, they are in some positions even more because they have more double bonds than omega-6. And I talked about this a little bit with Peter from Hyperlipid on a previous podcast, on my podcast as well. And so it appears to me that humans do need a little bit of omega-3 in their diet, but it also appears to me that we can get more than enough omega-3 from a variety of sources from animal fat, whether it's the marrow, the tallow, the suet, or the brain. Hunter-gatherers don't get the brain all the time. The brain is small. When I was with the Hadza, we ate the baboon brain, but they're not eating brains every day. And so I don't think humans need
well,
brain.
even vegans have a brain. So.
Yeah.
So,
True. Well, but you could make arguments. There are interesting studies that suggest that you could correlate the level of B12 in someone's blood with the size of their brain, at least in elderly adults. And of course, the suggested hypothesis or the compelling hypothesis is that as you have less vitamin B12 in your body, in your blood, you have a smaller brain. And that's what's been observed, at least correlationally. And so you could imagine that, in populations of people who have less B12, they're probably eating less animal foods. I certainly see that in people that I work with and people that I know, when they eat more animal foods, their B12 levels go way, way up, often above the reference range that are calculated with 2 standard deviations from the mean. And so vegans eating less animal foods could potentially have lots of less animal-based nutrients, leading to possibly smaller brains. I wish this were studied because that would blow the lid off of any discussion of the sustainability or health nature of a plant-based diet. That would be a horrible thing to do if you were shrinking your brain. Let's talk a little bit about the stable isotope studies, and then let's talk about shrinking brains. So in the paper, you have a summary of, it must be 10 or 12 stable isotope studies that I think are fascinating. Walk us through some of this. Like, what is a stable isotope study? What do they show?
okay, so if every animal accumulates, as they eat, accumulates isotopes of nitrogen from proteins, okay, that they eat. So if they eat a lot of protein, they end up with a lot of nitrogen isotopes. 15. That's the isotope that we're looking for. And so if let's say take an elephant that eats only is an herbivore, so there is so much protein in his food, and he concentrate already some of the isotope. And now we eat the elephant, so we already eat a more concentrated source of that isotope. So what you can do is you can go measure the isotopes of the herbivores. I'm talking about this nitrogen 15 isotope, and measure the isotopes in the carnivores in a certain area, and measure the isotopes in the collagen of humans from that period, and you can actually say that this is the trophic level. Is if you find the same trophic levels as carnivores have, which is normally what you do in this period, you can place humans as carnivores in the same group. Now there are some problems with that because it's only the protein. So people used to say, yeah, but you can eat a lot of plants as well, and they don't have much protein in them, and still they don't register. So you may find that people that eat meat eat also a lot of plants, up to 50% plants. The only problem is that these guys didn't take into account that the meat comes with fat. So fat even register less protein then or zero protein compared to plants. Plants have about, on average, about 14% protein in them. So, and every meat comes with plants, with fat. So the end result is that when you take, there's a lot of argument about how indicative it is, and there are a lot of problems that we won't go into it. But I found a paper that was in preprint when I'm not sure if it was published already, but it went and took all kinds of societies like Eskimos and those from Papua New Guinea, populations where the diet was known, okay? And on all spectrum, from plants to 100% animals. And the protein isotope, it was as expected. So I think it's fairly reliable. Now, if you look at the numbers, now for this to obtain the isotope, you need collagen. So it can't be, humans that are older than, let's say, 50,000 years ago. And also you have to have some cold climate to preserve the collagen. So it gets preserved from that period. Later you can have from warmer periods, but all I think 100%, almost 100% of the studies, and I think there are more than 10, show that humans were carnivores. I mean, there are more carnivores actually than the carnivores in their area, because the large animals accumulate higher percentage of that isotope. So when you eat larger animals, your level of the isotope is higher. So that was the interpretation of why actually humans had a higher level of this nitrogen isotope than other carnivores.
So we're looking
And only at the end of the Stone Age, you start to see an increase or reduction in the trophic level, and you start to see lower levels of that isotope. So it also shows that, by the way, it goes through a higher, actually even higher level of isotope. In the last, let's say it goes like a certain level of isotopes, which I said can be interpreted as consuming large animals, and then there's a higher level of the isotope, and that was in some cases, and that was interpreted as consumption of fish, aquatic resources. Because in aquatic resources, you have a more developed trophic structure. So fish eat fish that eat fish that eat fish. So they have a higher concentration of the isotope. And so it looks like, maybe I'll write a paper about it one day, but it looks like humans went from being a carnivore to being, what do you call it, pescivore or whatever?
Yeah.
Eating fish before they went to eat plants. Fish was more preferable energetically. And by the way, if you go and look at the record of energetic return, fish have much higher energetic return than obtaining fish. Have much higher energetic return in ethnographic situations than plants. So in areas where fish was available, they first of all went to fish, and then only when probably they finished the fish as well, they went to plants.
So there's a clear hierarchy here in so many lines of evidence suggesting that large animals, land animals were preference, and then maybe fish were a go-between, and then plants are the least preferential food. As I've said in the past, plants are survival food for humans. They're not optimal food. But it is interesting that we can look at these stable isotopes in the collagen tissues of animals and get a sense of where humans might have been on a trophic level. And I really appreciate you mentioning that other paper. Maybe we can look for it and see if it is in print about currently living groups and comparing their stable isotope levels with their known diets. But it is interesting that a paper like that might exist, suggesting or corroborating the accuracy of this type of measurement, because presumably we know what ratios of plants and animals these foods eat, and these people eat, and we can correlate that with observed stable isotopes in their bones or collagenous tissues. So this is from your paper. It's a summary of these multiple studies on stable isotopes. Again, this is all the references are in your paper. We'll put all this in the show notes, but there are maybe there's 15 here or 14 papers, and you can see that in almost every single one, the stable isotope levels were suggesting that the diet was composed of a carnivorous level. And I think it's important to point out that when we are saying carnivore, we're not necessarily saying they ate nothing but animal foods, but maybe more accurately reflecting that we were of an animal-based specialization as an omnivore. Would that be an accurate characterization, that we have been preferentially eating animal foods throughout our evolution?
Yeah. First of all, there are a lot of evidence that we ate plants. And we ate plants, and fish even, for over a million years. So there's no question that we ate plants. But here, I think that the analogy that I brought with the present-day carnivores is telling. And in present day, you don't even have to be a zoologist to agree that large social carnivores always hunt large animals. And not only they hunt large animals, but they get most of their food from hunting. And this is not just by chance. It has a lot of energetic background to it. It has a reason. Now, to get large animals, you need to learn. You need to learn a lot. Other large predators like wolves, like lions, like hyena, they get to do the hunting only after years of instructions and study. So you are investing a lot of energy in learning how to hunt. And once you're able to do it, you have to hunt not only for yourself, but for all the other guys who are learning. So it's not like you can say, okay, I don't like go hunting today. Maybe we get a few fruits from here and there. It just doesn't work that way. Large social carnivores have to hunt most of the time, have to base most of their energy on animals. Now, that's why the zoologists give a definition of a term called hypercarnivores. And to their taste, hypercarnivores are carnivores that are consuming more than 70% from animals. So this, I think, can be applied very nicely, this analogy to humans. And it leaves a lot of room for plants, of course, depending on the season. And that's what I think, that's the maximum we can say. It's that according to analogy with present carnivores, we consumed more or less over 70% of our calories from animals. And I don't know if there's 30%, but that probably changed from one place to another. depending on the season and ecology. But we did eat plants, no question. By the way, these are plants that you will never find in a supermarket today. So you find the meat is not very different. But if you go to a supermarket today, you don't find anything that resembles Paleolithic food, apart from, by the way, honey. And the honey is another story, this honey. Okay, you go to the Hadza and you see that they eat a lot of honey, but like we said, there is not much honey when elephants are around. Because they kill the trees that the bees that produce a lot of honey live in.
And people can see a video of me collecting this honey with the Hadza on my Instagram. I went with them into the bush outside of their camp, and we found a number of different sources of honey. They have honey from a stingless bee, which they call kanoa, and they sometimes get honey from bees that sting, which is a little different. And the stingless bees are the ones that occur in the baobab tree, and they would find these little sort of wax straws that the bees use as an entrance to the inside of the baobab tree, and they would see these, and then we could chop into the tree with an axe and get all of this honey from these stingless bees. And then they would actually make stakes and climb the baobab tree to look for more of this honey. But as you're saying, when the elephants were on the plains, there may have been a different interaction between the animals, and there may have been less baobab trees, so perhaps there was less of this honey. But it's clearly something that's always been treasured by humans as an energetically favorable food. Now, I think let's just wrap this up with some discussion of the last 85,000 years and maybe put it in the context or the framework of the human brain, because we talked about the expansion of the human brain, but it doesn't look like that story has gone on uninterrupted. There's pretty good evidence looking at cranial vault size that our brains have been shrinking over the last, 20 to 30,000 years, and could we make some hypotheses about what might be going on here? But it does seem, as we've suggested a few times in this podcast, that our history, our lineage is a people who became human by consuming large amounts of animal organs and meat. We haven't talked about organs in this podcast, but when we're talking about hunting animals, it's very clear that humans ate the organs. And in fact, they treasure these organs. This is why we do what we do at Heart and Soil. But as we move through and we become, Homo sapiens, and then last 85 to 50,000 to 30,000 years ago, it appears that humans were eating a little bit less animals. And can we see some correlation with the size of the human brain, or what do you think the implications are for this today?
Okay, so let's start with why the brain grew in the first place. So we said that primates solve problems with the brain. And so we solved the problem, and we became Homo erectus, and we managed to learn how to hunt. We developed spears, and we evolved the legs to run, etc., etc. And Homo erectus is actually the longest living, it's not living today, but the longest lived species, right? It was over 1.5 million years. It was very successful species. But he already started to grow the brain. So you have Homo erectus with a 700 cc or even 600 cc in the Dmanisi, if you accept that they were Homo erectus. And you have Homo erectus with 1100 cc's. So already the brain started to grow in Homo erectus. And you ask yourself, if he was such a clever guy, and he already managed to live quite nicely hunting, why would he need a larger brain? And then came Heidelbergensis. So I'm just giving a schematic. It's a little bit more complicated. But so Heidelbergensis had like 1200 cc. So the next one is Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens maybe had started with 1300, 1400 cc, and actually you find the individuals with, I don't know, 16, 1700 cc as well. And then all of a sudden you have a decline. So my theory was that the brain grew because we had to hunt smaller animals. And hunting large animals is one technology and one set of know-how. Hunting smaller animals, they run away. They are more difficult to track because they don't leave heavy spurs. So they are more difficult to track. You need larger brain. You need to know a lot about the environment, about other animals, about these animals. So you need to store a lot, and you need to make because they are running away, they are escaping. You need to make very quick decisions, processing a lot of information at the same time. So you need a larger brain to hunt the smaller animals, and this is a trend that we see. So this is the association. But at the end of the day, when you get to the animals. Your average size animals is 25 kilos. A larger brain will just not help you anymore. And that's why, by the way, why we domesticated the dog. And the dog helped us in chasing and tracking animals. But in the end, we had to start to rely on plants. And as I said, at the end of the Stone Age, the size of animals declined, and we started to get more and more of our energy from plants. And plants don't run away. That's the great thing about it. And this is why we also became more sedentary. And also the association, I think I talked about it, the association between the diet quality in primates. There is association between the diet quality and the size of the brain. So you can say that at the end of the Stone Age, the diet quality started to decline. So when it started to decline, actually individuals that have a smaller brain, that don't demand that much energy, because brain is a energy hungry organ, that don't demand so much energy, but still can manage to get plants, they actually have a higher fitness. And this is why you see an evolution towards brain size decline at the end of the Stone Age, which lasted through the agriculture, the domestication. And by the way, domestication is also where the size of brains of other animals gets smaller, because they are now protected. They don't need dogs don't need to chase or hunt, and the other animals don't need to run away. They are protected, so their size, the brain size, also declines.
So as we become domesticated humans inhabiting a zoo.
Absolutely, we are domesticated like hell.
So if we got back to being a little more wild and challenging our senses and needing to make critical decisions in the wilderness, we would grow bigger brains. But people can decide whether that's something that they want in general or not. But it's so interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Miki. I know we could go for hours, but I think this has been a great review of this really interesting paper. I'll leave the final comments to you and see, as you've looked at all of this, and I think that you've been very open about the fact that you're primarily an anthropologist and not a biologist or a physician, but from your perspective, as you've looked at all of this, can we take anything away here from how we might eat or live as humans in 2021 based on all of this history? Because I think that that's what we're trying to reconstruct with this story. But what do you think this indicates for us?
Look, the most surprising thing for me from this investigation was how much of a carnivore we still have, biologically speaking. Because we've been, domesticated for the last 11,000 years. And there are some adaptations, like the ability to metabolize lactose, etc. But still, we have all this, for instance, this business with the acidity, yeah? To have high acidity kept for so long, when we really don't eat already so much, old meat or whatever, and all the signs that I found, all the evidence that I found in the biology, which I believe, by the way, is just we just scratched the surface. If we look more and more and more into it, we'll find more and more evidence that we are a carnivore. And so the biology is still far, far away from changing, from a full adaptation to an agricultural diet. The other thing is that we don't know. We don't know which of one of us is adapted in that way or another way. We just don't do these studies of ourselves. We don't. I did. I'm sure you did too. 23andMe and things like that, to find out what are genes, where are we adapted and where not to agricultural diet. But most of us don't know. And I think what we can take is that, and I've always looked at the paleo diet as a safety paradigm, not as an ideal diet, but as a safety template. And since we don't know to what extent we are adapted to agriculture, and it looks like we are not that well adapted yet, I think the safest diet is a carnivore diet. This is the safest. Yeah, eat a little honey as well. Don't eat too much, because this is not the way we live. But carnivore is the safest. That's it. Otherwise, you can eat whatever you want. But if you want to be safe, eat carnivore.
And I think that I would agree with you that it's, though we've had, thousands of years of adaptation to changing dietary patterns, there are still multiple lines of evidence that suggest that humans are very adapted, or mostly adapted. We're pretty much built to eat the majority of our diet from animals. And this has been my interest in animal-based diets, quote unquote, and suggesting to people that if they would like to include plant foods, be aware of a spectrum of toxicity. But I think that most of us will thrive, and I've seen this over and over and over, when we get the majority of our diet from animal foods with a lesser amount from plant foods, just in terms of nutrient availability, energetics, fat content, all the unique things that are in animal foods. And it's interesting to see that there's a good evolutionary anthropology sort of story leading us to this point. And we can only reconstruct it and then make our decisions and experiment as humans and see how we feel. But it's really cool to see that this way of eating benefits so many people, and that it's supported by where we've come from as humans. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Where can people find more of your stuff? If people want to connect with you, where should people look for you if you want them to?
I have a blog called paleostyle.com. I just wrote a post there after maybe 2 years, and it summarized the four papers that I published recently with colleagues, which really gives the whole picture of what we discussed today, and links to these papers, and the ResearchGate. ResearchGate, I have listed all my papers. In Twitter, I go by the name of, by the handle of Ben-Dor Miki, M-I-K-I. Yeah, that's the one. And ResearchGate, that's it.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think it's so cool. Like I said, I'm so appreciative of all of the ways that you've helped me in the past and for your contribution here. And I really enjoyed the conversation, Miki. I hope we get to hang out in person soon, my friend.
Yeah, same here.